So today I'm going to be talking about the 10 books that I want to reread during 2021. Every year I pick out 10 books that I really want to get to again. If you missed the first video in my 2021 reading series, I'll have that linked right above. This is a series of videos I do every year. I talk about the books that I have to read during the next year, the books I want to reread, the series I want to continue with, my most anticipated, everything like that. Without further ado, let's get into my rereads. So the first book on my list is Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. I really want to get to this one again. When I first read it, I really enjoyed it. And Ernest Cline just came out with a sequel to this book after a long time. I don't think it was planned. This was a standalone. So those are always a little bit iffy, the ones that are the sequels that are added on later, but I would like to read it. But first I need to get a refresher on this one and see if I really enjoyed it enough to read the continuation. I think I'll still like it, but I just want to make sure before spending money on a sequel. Next up I have The Grace Year by Kim Liggett. I absolutely adored this book when I first read it. It was my favorite book of 2018 or 2019. I can't remember which year this came out, but I absolutely was head over heels in love with it. And I just am really excited to continue on and read this again. So it came out 2019. This is kind of a Handmaid's Tale-esque book, and I was just so passionate about it the first time that I read it, so I really am hoping that the next time I read through it, I also enjoy it. Then I have When Dembele Met Rishi by Sandhya Menon. I just want to read this one before I continue on with her other books. I've got quite a few that I just have never picked up. I'm really looking forward to There's Something About Sweetie, which I have on my 5-star predictions. But before we read that one, I want to reread this one and see if I still love it. I just thought it was the cutest YA contemporary. And actually me and my husband are learning Hindi, so I am really interested in picking up books that have Indian culture within it and just getting some more exposure to the Indian culture, which will hopefully help my language skills, which are very minimal right now. Then I have Illuminae by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. This is probably the most needed reread on this TBR. It's been a long time since I read Illuminae, and I think I've only read it one time. I might have read it twice by now. I consider this to be one of my all-time favorite books, and I feel like I just need a refresher every couple years to make sure that it's still an all-time favorite book and not just a favorite book of the moment when I read it. And that's what I use these rereads for quite a bit, is to solidify, is this a favorite book, or did I just really love the reading experience the first time I read it, but it's not quite an all-time favorite. But I definitely need a reread of this whole series just because of how much I loved it the first time around. Then I've got the book that's been the longest since I've read it last, and that is Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. I read this book when I was maybe 15 or 16, so it's been a very long time since I've picked this one up. Definitely need a reread. I don't remember anything from this book. Looking forward to it. I really want to get back into Agatha Christie. I read quite a bit of her books when I was around that age, but I want to get back into them and I want to pick up the other ones that I haven't read because I really love her mystery style. Then I have Quarantine by Lex Thomas. This was actually on my rereads of 2020 list, but I just did not get to this one. This was the only one on my list I didn't get to. And this one I haven't read in maybe 4 or 5 years, but I loved this series when I first read it. It's one of the most underrated YA series that I've read, and I just wanted more people to read it at the time, but now I need to go back and see if I still enjoy it or if my taste has changed too much. YA has been hit or miss with me on my rereads. Sometimes I really love them so much, and then sometimes the next time that I read it, it's just not as good. This is following a high school where just suddenly one day it just like goes on lockdown and no one can leave. All the adults start dying from this really mysterious virus, and they're locked in this high school for so long, and like all this crazy stuff starts happening. They compare this to a modern day Lord of the Flies, which would be a very accurate representation from what I remember, but I definitely want to read this one again and see if I still like it and if I could still recommend it. Then I have Dry by Jared and Neil Shusterman. This was also one of my favorite books of the year. I believe last year or the year before. I don't have any doubts that I will like this one again when I reread it because Neil Shusterman is one of my very favorite authors. I've loved almost everything that I've read by him, and this was no exception. This is following a couple different kids in California when there's this huge drought and all the water supply gets cut off, and they are just trying to survive until they can get some sort of relief, whether it be from rain or the government or whatnot, but there's looting and all this crazy stuff happening. This book was absolutely incredible, and I have no doubts that I'm going to enjoy it again. I just purely want to read it again for enjoyment. Then I've got The Martian by Andy Weir. This is actually the second Andy Weir book that is going to be on my 2021 TBR, or third, I guess. If you wait for an upcoming video, you'll see that there's a third one. I loved this book so much. This was in my top 5 favorite books of last year, and I really want to read it again just because I just loved it so much. Same as with Dry. I don't have any doubts that this is going to be an all-time favorite book. Loved it the first time. Super excited to read it again. If you don't know, this is following an astronaut, and him and his team go to Mars to conduct some studies and find out about the soil content and different things like that. But after a huge dust storm, it happens like right when they get there, basically, he gets stranded there by himself with very minimal equipment, and he has to try to figure out, how am I going to survive until they can come back and get me, and how do I get in contact with them so that they can rescue me. With this one, I'm just super excited to return to this story. Then I have A Fury Born by Claire Legrand. This is another one of my past yearly favorites. I believe this was my favorite book of 2018. Absolutely loved this book so much when I first read it. But since I've read it, there's been a lot of mixed reviews that have come out, and I just kind of wonder, like, would I still enjoy that now? Because a lot of my friends I see reading it and not really enjoying it, and I just wonder if it was just my very particular reading taste at that exact time that I read this first that made me really love it, and if I return to it, maybe my taste have changed. And then I read the second book and I didn't really love it that much. It was kind of like a 3.5-star book, so I'm just hoping that when I return to this one, I will love it as much as I did the first time, but I'm a little bit apprehensive just because I didn't enjoy the second book quite as much, and I don't want to read the third one until I like either establish that I loved the first one, or I establish that I don't really enjoy this series that much. So I would like to reread this one and the next one, but we'll see how that goes. Then of course I have my annual reread of Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. I read this every year, I've read it every year for many years, and there's not really much to say about it. I just love this book, read it all the time, one of my all-time favorites. Well, that's all 10 books that I'm going to be rereading this next year. If you have any books you're wanting to reread, please let me know in the comments down below. I would love to hear about them and chat with you if you reread books often. If you don't, I usually read about 1 a month, but sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes I read more, sometimes I don't. It just depends on what I'm feeling like for that month. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to like it down below and subscribe if you would like to see more content from me in the future, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!